because most business models are not scalable.
Revenue is vanity, profit is reality, but cash is the sanity. The founder must evolve from operator to architect.
You cannot scale if you're pursuing a market that is niche or small. We've covered many pillars of scaling. You gave your framework. It was really people, a strategy. Then you spoke about execution, and we got into some of the drivers of execution here. Now let's go beyond execution. What are the other pillars of scaling beyond?
Yeah. So that was the three that we've covered. The last one in Vern's framework is cash. So what you see a lot of is that companies will grow without really paying attention to the cash flow. Take WeWork, for example. They were scaling by replicating, buying more properties, but they didn't pay attention to the cash flow, which was on short-term lets. So clearly there was a mismatch of cash, and we know the story. And we see this very often, and maybe particularly so in Asia, is that we don't pay attention to cash. We always look at profit, but they say, revenue is vanity, profit is reality, but cash is the sanity. And really cash is the oxygen. If you don't have clear strategy towards managing your cash flow, you will die. And it is unfortunate that in the Asian context, we don't have ready available funds to be tapped for SMEs, especially. Not like especially like in the US, you see a lot of different scales of funds being available, whether it's microfinancing or even online group financing that you could get to get money anyway to survive, So a lot of time you can see businesses grow revenue, but they die at the same time because they ignore the cash conversion cycle. They keep selling, but the cash collection is longer than the credit terms they get from the suppliers, for example. And when we talk about cash, if we look at businesses like the supermarkets, that's a very interesting business that whilst they have very, very small margins, the strategy is really about generating huge amounts of cash and basically being a cash machine and earning the interest on the positive cash that they have. And I think I don't have deep numbers, but I think the interest return on the cash that they have probably matches the trading profit that they have on merchandise.
So it's really what you're saying is they sell on cash, but they buy on credit.
Absolutely.
So they have that,
cash carry
the cash
for, call it 30 days or 60 days, whatever. So that business model and the strategy is really about getting longer terms from the suppliers and selling more at the front end.
This is a very important point. You've spoken about cash rather than capital. You made a very big, there's a very big distinction here. So you're getting very precise, it's actually cash. It's not capital, right?
Well, unless you have endless ability to draw down on other people's capital. So in the event that you are cash negative, then you would have to look for capital. But really it is, if you're looking to scale, to be managing your cash flow and understanding where you're going to run out of oxygen, and either you find new oxygen tanks, which is tapping capital markets or whatever, basically doing fundraising, you're going to die. So, the very simple thing is, you sell more, but it's on credit and you are having to pay out your bills and your staff, your salaries. And that negative cash flow gap is where you run out of oxygen.
Obviously, this is a very big, I suppose, challenge that most SMEs and entrepreneurs kind of grapple with. I suppose, partly because they're not financially literate. Numeracy, literacy, if you may. But they gun for new business. They gun for big revenues. They gun for profits. But then you actually don't have cash in the bank.
Yeah. And, this is where we talk about the founder mindset. Unless he's aware, he's not going to employ a CFO or maybe at least a good accountant who can help him to tell him where he's going to be on his cash flow. And I think I have seen many founders very good at selling, but they also hate numbers. And it has very often been at a very detrimental cost that they don't look at the numbers. Whether it is being cheated by the CFO, which has happened many a time, because it's just entrusted, they don't want to know. But personally, I think it is critical that everybody in the company understands numbers so that first, it's a self-checking mechanism. Secondly, they are data-driven decisions.
I've often fallen into this trap. I can read numbers, I can analyze numbers, but personally, I'm not particularly enthused or inspired by numbers. So I do the next best thing. I delegate it or outsource it. And where it does not work is when I trust somebody, completely. And then let's say the person doesn't deliver or keeps you in the dark, that's really when it goes south. And where it works is if that person is very strategic and keeps you closely in the loop and thinks more strategically rather than like a typical accountant. In those kinds of scenarios, I've had a good run. But where I've blown it is, because of my personal, let's say, disinclination towards, revenues, cash flows, kinds of details, outsourcing it to people and then trusting them, and then you end up paying the price. I've been long-suffering a victim of this.
Well, let me tell you, you're not the only one. I see that a lot. And personally, I'm a big advocate on numbers because I think numbers tell stories, and really managing business from the stories is really a much better decision-making process than plugging it out of thin air. And when the mindset of the founder allows, what I do coach is financial literacy throughout the company so that we can peg KPIs and the profit sharing, and that everyone then looks at these numbers and see how they actually impact the bottom line in their particular role. And when everyone does that, it means that you have a troop of mini entrepreneurs who are thinking like a business owner. And that's power.
Talking about cash, a good friend of mine, the investor, he shared this very powerful insight. He said, your blood never lies when you test your blood. And he said, similarly, when it comes to business, the cash a business generates never lies.
Yeah.
He said that, tells a significant part of the story of the business.
So we talked about wealth creation and when you sell a business. If you look at how a lot of the companies are sold and valued, cash flow is a big part of it. If you are a cash flow positive business, it is highly desired. Michael Dell was clever enough to build his whole strategy based on positive cash flow. He was selling online, collecting money up front.
Quite unprecedented those days. And even now, I still haven't met another player that has this kind of model, in that category.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, just cash management can become a business strategy, like for the supermarkets.
Let's go to the next pillar or driver, when it comes to scaling. We've looked at cash, we've looked at people, we've looked at strategy, we've looked at execution. What's the next driver?
I've added leadership, right? So what we've clearly seen is that leadership is the multiplier. So the leader must first scale himself, or at least open his mindset towards scaling. And that's really, as we talked about earlier, it's about the ability to predict and delegate. So in a synopsis, the founder must evolve from operator to architect. It is about moving away from working in the business to working on the business. And I think that is actually a big shift. What I have encountered is that suddenly the founders feel redundant. They are no longer busy, but they are busy, or they should be busy, thinking and designing rather than doing. And interestingly enough, if we look at some of the studies, it is much harder work thinking. You consume a lot more calories than doing. So I think there is a natural human tendency to move away from thinking to just doing. So just tell me what I need to do is a typical tourist workforce.
And it becomes scary when I can understand if tourists think like tourists, or employees, I suppose, think along those lines. But when an entrepreneur is driven by habitual, let's say, behaviors, or purely transactional in, let's say, the way he or she does things, then it's going to be a real challenge. One of the things I found working with entrepreneurs is this significant resistance to investing in cognitive analysis. They just prefer to take a recipe which has worked in different parts of the world. Most likely, it's almost always in China because for some reason, the entrepreneurs in Malaysia are trying to replicate what's happening in China, which is not just a dangerous thing, it's a stupid thing as well. This lack of what I call cognitive muscle.
Well, we talked about the human nature is not to think, or, it takes a lot more energy to think than to do. And it's interesting you mentioned China, and I mean, now we're seeing the onslaught of Chinese businesses coming into Southeast Asia. And what I've noticed is that they think that the Asian markets are similar to China in terms of size, spending power, and they are disrupting the market because they're putting in a lot of money, and I don't think they're seeing the returns.
They're dumping, really? Category for category, you can see the level of dumping, which is literally unprecedented.
So we're talking about when does scaling fail? And I think this is where we can see many examples coming of how Chinese companies are trying to scale overseas without doing the cognitive process of really understanding the strategy. And you will see a lot of money being burnt.
You've touched on many aspects of leadership. I know it's an area that's of particular interest to you. So I just want to explore this a little bit.
Sure.
You spoke about leadership is, is not just a habituated way of going about your default behaviors. It's also about being open. It's that capacity to change. And then you used a very interesting phrase, it's this transition from being an operator to being an architect. See, an operator is about doing, but to be an architect is about thinking and it's about conceiving. And then you also used another phrase, which is thinking and designing, right? Which is quite a difficult, I suppose, thing to do, because you've got to tap into a faculty which you haven't tapped into for a long time. What are the other attributes of leadership do you think are relevant to entrepreneurs?
I think in today's world, there is a lot of change in the way businesses are going to be. For a start, I think consumers today care a lot about how you make your money. So this notion of can businesses be a force for doing good has come up a lot. And we've also seen very clear successes when a business has a clear form of doing good, such as Patagonia. $1 billion company, still privately held, in fact now held by all its employees. And this thing just exploded. So when we talk about leadership, a lot of the time is, hey, let's see what's successful out there and let's just follow. The courage that's required to do something different, to walk where no path has been trodden, I think it's an area where we talk about in terms of the future of leadership and success. And we also have AI coming on, which again is going to be highly disruptive, that needs very brave decisions because a lot of the time it's going into the unknown. So two aspects here, Can we intentionally design businesses to become force of goods from the beginning? A lot of the mindset is, hey, yes, of course I want to do good in my business, but let's go make some money first. And then we see how we can do good. And there are enough models today around the world, successful businesses that have clearly shown that if you start with the right intention, you can still be very successful financially, as well as doing good simultaneously.
So the two attributes you touched on are courage, which is really about, getting to a path which is unknown, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the other one is, to do business that has a higher purpose beyond, the transactional and the mercenary, let's say, reason. Is there any other important, let's say, attributes of leadership you think entrepreneurs need to bring to bear in order to be able to scale?
So I think a lot of the ability to scale is also limited by the entrepreneur himself. So we talked about, you touched on this word purpose, and I would extend that to also fulfillment. What I've seen being part of entrepreneurs organization, young presidents organization, is that many leaders are clearly very successful by what society defines as success, at least financially. But many also find themselves somewhat unfulfilled or perhaps not living up to their full potential. So this is where limiting beliefs coming from the subconscious start to hinder the ability to scale. So what I'm saying is that we're all the product of our past experiences. And many a time we are not aware of what our past experiences have imparted in our subconscious that limits us to realize our full potential. And in fact, there is a lot of inner work, and I think there is now a big movement in terms of the creating the self-awareness for people to do their own inner work, to heal from their childhood traumas or negative experiences so that they can become a lot more effective and receptive towards scaling.
I'm glad you touched on this. People tend to always focus on the hard attributes of leadership. They seldom talk about the subtler and the softer attributes of leadership, like self-awareness, because it's impossible to transform yourself if you're not self-aware. It is impossible to even deeply listen to another person and to see something which is outside your field of experience and to be empathetic once again if you're not self-aware. If you're full of yourself, you can't see that. I'm glad you brought this very important attribute, self-awareness. I just want to build on a couple of things, to wrap this particular, let's say, topic we've been discussing, which is on the different pillars of leadership. One very big challenge that entrepreneurs, repeatedly face, it's linked to self-awareness. It is this obsession with garnering and hogging all the limelight and the glory. You are the go-to guy in the company, and you want to permanently be the go-to guy in your business, and you do not give either space or opportunity or the latitude to even very good team players to shine, to excel, and to get a huge part of the credit. And one of the things I've seen with the truly good leaders, particularly the ones that are not just self-aware but have scaled companies, is the one thing they've realized, probably earlier in the day is this: the quickest way to scale is to ensure that your people are able to shine, and often far more than you are able to shine, because I think one fundamental ingredient of leadership is not just about how much you're able to grow as a person. It's also how much you're able to grow your people and get them to become the best versions of themselves. Yes, you got to tend your garden, but an equally important part of tending your garden I'm using as a metaphor of your business, it's also to make your leadership shine and grow and blossom in that garden as well.
I think you hit it on the nail. I mean, leadership is not about your ego. And they say the test of the quality of leadership is how well a company performs when you're away as a leader. And that's really about teamwork. It's really about the rest of the team and how you have been able to develop and grow them. And I think a truly enlightened leader would understand that if it wasn't the team, he himself can only do so much. Without the whole team and an effective team, ideally a commando team, that's when you can really do incredible things. If a leader doesn't understand teamwork, it's going to be very limiting.
In fact, I'd like to round this with, let's say, a couple of perspectives. Just to add to your list, you've given a list of 5 key elements or building blocks to scale a company. Maybe I'll add 2 more to that list. To me, the 6th, let's say, foundational element is the brand. The reason I say that is businesses can grow in 2 kinds of ways. One is through capital. It's through people, it's through systems. I call them largely a supply side driven approach. The other way to do it is the brand itself. When you have a powerful proposition, a value proposition, when your brand powerfully resonates with the market segments, captures their imagination, the brand itself can be the catalyst to transform and scale the company. Because at the deepest part of the brand is the culture, which ultimately becomes the glue that holds everybody together. You kind of touched on it. You spoke about purpose. You spoke about a higher order. And to me, the next attribute, it's technically not an attribute. I would qualify it like this. To me, when a business wants to scale, it must have a very powerful and noble reason why. I repeatedly bump into entrepreneurs want to scale for the sake of scaling. You ask them, why do you want to scale? They say, because I want to get bigger. Or they say, I want to go pan, let's say, ASEAN. Or they say, pan, let's say, Asia. The primary motivation is really about getting bigger.
Money.
Or it's very, very mercenary Asia. One of the very big challenges with let's grow or scale for the sake of growing and scaling, why I think it is dramatically underwhelming and not compelling is this. It doesn't have a powerful reason why good people should join the bandwagon or let's say the journey. To me, the second one is when the motivations are largely mercenary and monetary, it does not tap into the better angels of human nature. I think we're going to inhabit a world, where if there is no nobility, if there is no do good, be good, you're not going to really be able to even scale. It's slowly going to become one of the drivers even of success because the Gen Zs have one very important criteria. 76% of them, if I get my numbers right, want to work for a company that has a human cost.
The social impact.
Very much. Very much.
So this was what I was talking about when we talk about business as a force for doing good. So what we have seen is that companies that have a very clear sense of purpose that is larger than themselves or larger than making money, it binds the whole energy of every team member to create great things. And we've seen this repeatedly when you have a very clearly defined purpose, it motivates people. And in Vern's framework, all that comes under part of the strategy, including the brand. And I think a successful brand is essentially stands for a very clear strategy. So we go back to IKEA. And the strategy was really about promising that one-stop experience and delivered through flat pack. Right. So that became what IKEA is known for, and which is coming from the strategy. To me, when a brand becomes really well known, then you have clearly means that your strategy has been successful. So whether it's a chicken and egg, we can drive it as to, hey, what does it stand for, and build it accordingly, and eventually it's self-perpetuating.
I have always had a bias to the building of cultures and so on. I start with the soft and then look at putting together some of the harder structures. There's no perfect way to do it. You've kind of looked at 5 key, let's say, pillars, including the leadership part. And then I kind of gave my perspective. I'd like to look at 2 more key issues before we call this a wrap. When it comes to scaling, just to make it more tangible, to make it more real, can you think of a few brands, businesses, and companies that got on the scaling path but blew it, fell apart, and imploded? So could you touch on a few examples? And I'll do that from my end as well then.
Well, we talk about why a lot of companies are unable to scale, and it's not an easy process. So I think it's a lot easier to find, well, most companies haven't scaled, in my opinion. I mean, we talked about WeWork as one that clearly failed because their strategy was wrong and the cash component of that was wrong. But I think in that regard, there are far fewer companies that have scaled successfully because they had addressed all the pillars of, that we talked about today. So take Zeus Coffee, for example. They clearly started off, I mean, the founders were technology people, and they clearly started from day one with systems being correct so that they had the data and they could scale this rapidly. With the data, they could find the secret formula and be able to replicate very quickly. So I think that's a clear example of what scaling success looks like, whether it is Speedmart, so they're able to then dominate the market. Today, for Zeus Coffee, they have more outlets than Starbucks in Malaysia. I mean, over 5-6 year period? I mean, that's a staggering story. And you take someone like Speedmart, for example, Mr. DIY, they're very clearly dominating the categories they're in because they found a standard formula to replicate. I see, like in the food and beverage industry, there are a lot of people who try to scale, but I think they failed in one of the various pillars we talked about, and they're no longer around. People like Papa Rich. I think that F&B is a very dynamic industry that you see this happening a lot.
Maybe from my end, I'll probably go through a list of companies that had the capital, sometimes incredible amount of capital, but kind of blew it or imploded. Let me just go through a short list here. I really have a long list, because I'm in the business of studying failure. One company that took off like a meteor was Quibi. It was in the United States. This was set up by two incredible people, Jeff Katzenberg and Meg Whitman. You can't get two bigger people in one company. Such two stalwarts here. They launched this short format streaming platform. And you'll be shocked, they raised 1.9 billion in a matter of months. Of course, Jeff Katzenberg, he just needs to make a call, and Meg Whitman as well. They had 1.9 billion. And they started acquiring, thousands of original, piece of content from a lot of the big platforms, whether it was Disney or, several others. They spent about $1 billion plus just on getting those, great original content. And this was predicted, to make 7.5 billion. They thought they will achieve a few million downloads. Unfortunately, their downloads were about 300,000, 400,000, and slowly it kind of imploded. They had a stunning amount of capital. And what makes this unique is they moved so fast, spent so fast, acquired all this original content so fast for $1 billion, and blew up 1.9 billion in 6 months and closed in 6 months. I've never seen this kind of meteoric rise and fall. So it was 6 months, right? Raising 1.9 billion, scaling, acquisition at a frenzy, right? And then seeing a fall and quickly winding up and saying it's not working and shutting shop.
So what do you see went wrong there? Was it strategy or?
Did not have a business model. I think that was, they had so much of capital.
Yeah, the revenue model was clearly flawed.
Exactly. They went on a rampage, throwing big money to acquire a whole raft of assets without doing this product market fit and trying to find out whether it's even working in the first place. It's a pure supply side, get a lot of capital, storm the market, and hopefully you're going to hit the target and take off.
So we go back to that question of what is the problem it was trying to solve?
They just had this idea, which is the short streaming format. You got long streaming and then, the 10-minute short streaming. So they thought, it's a very good idea, but if they'd spent more time exploring the idea, testing out the idea, and iterating the product, and finally getting the product right, and then finally looking at what's the right target segment for it, pricing it correctly, and so on and so forth, they would have taken off. Because they had the money to do it, they certainly had the staying power, and you have Meg Whitman and Jeff Katzenberg. It's impossible to get it wrong because they had that awesome capital, level number one. And level number two, I think it was hubris. Often when you come with great size, great capital, along with it comes a lot of hubris.
Yeah.
And I think hubris was the primary reason why they fell apart.
So the question is, you have long form, so which is probably YouTube, right?
Yes.
And then
Netflix and lots of other players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they say there is medium format, if you want to call it that, 10 minutes. But is there really a need? So maybe the fit was, clearly Instagram works is 20 seconds or whatever it is, 1 minute, it would be max, right? So they clearly identified that 10 minutes, they thought there was a market, but it's either short or long.
Correct. And the other thing is, are people going to pay for something short? The problem with, trying to, stream TikTok content,
right,
and charge a fortune for it is not going to work, right? It just seems logical to me. Of course, I was not part of the research team. So we very clearly, having a good idea and a ton of capital and a star-studded team, and then you add a little bit of hubris to it, it's a recipe for disaster. So this is one. Another company that I can think of, which you probably would know of, is Zynga. It's a gaming company. This was the bellwether. They had the Farmville, they had a whole bunch of other games. And at one point, 70% of the traffic was Facebook. They were dominating Facebook, Yeah. This guy, I forget his name, Marcus something Pence or Marcus something, the founder, he's a pretty renowned entrepreneur, got it right in the first phase. And then they were valued at 20 billion. And left, right, and center, he was acquiring data centers for hundreds of millions. And then he went on a rampage buying a lot of studios. Okay? After all, you got a high valuation, right? Rather than testing your product, finding out what's the next innovation, what's the next trend. And ironically, if you can believe it, Zynga was really, frankly, the Google of the gaming industry. They took too many things for granted, including their own brand, and forgot that mobility, which is the mobile platforms, was really the platform in which people were graduating to, even for gaming. Okay, you got the serious gamers, of course. So they sit in front of these big consoles, but the non-serious gamers were becoming the biggest side. So what they ignored gaming on the mobile platform.
The shifts in the channel.
Yeah, the shift and so on. So what they had to eat humble pie. Of course, they didn't entirely, blow up and implode. They eventually sold at a valuation a lot less than their initial valuation. They were sold to a company called, if I'm not mistaken, Take-Two, which was fairly recently, I think 23 or 22 or something. Maybe it was even more recent than that. I think they were sold for about 12 billion. But this was also, a business that could have been valued at 100 billion, or even 200 billion. They really had everything it took to, get to that kind of level. So this is a company that got its scaling wrong, but it was not a total flop. They could still sell it off. To me, Evergrande is a ginormous example. They went on a rampage of a debt-fueled scaling strategy. They got billions, no, it's not billions, it's tens of billions of, loans and funding from banks. And they built, these massive, literally cities. They just threw huge money without testing either the neighborhood or the location. Like you saw what happened even in Johor. They built this huge, white elephant city. It kind of looks impressive, but, something very important is missing when you see that huge development. So they did not kind of look at resonating, connecting with a culture of a different country. They tried to replicate, a template from China, and it kind of blew up. So Evergrande, is in very serious trouble. And if not mistaken,
I think that's a very clear cash mismatch of cash flows.
You spoke about two things. In fact, it's not just the cash. You also spoke about, storming the market with a hell of a lot of capital, like the U.S. Navy SEALs taking over the Maduro from.
I think Malaysia has the equivalent purchasing power is different. Although I think there's different motivations for that project in Johor.
Correct. But a little bit of testing the waters, I also see this as part of hubris, It's just my speculation here. But I think people who've got a spectacular amount of capital walk into most markets with a level of arrogance and, this blind spot, which eventually brings it down to earth.
I think it's also the human nature. When it's easy come, it's easy go, right?
Correct.
And we've seen it so often, including ourselves. I think we've all had that experience,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
When it's easy come, it's easy go.
Right.
And, especially if it's other people's money and you're willing to, if you're not disciplined, again, we come back to discipline, about assessing the risk, then it all goes to, down the drain.
And closer to home, maybe I can look at a couple of companies here. One is a company called Kautim. And I think it had a lot of potential. It was really a marketplace for, home-related services. It was plumbing and cleaning services and so on. I think it's a very interesting, novel idea. They went on a rampant expansion spree. They got significant funding, running into tens of millions of dollars. And I thought their business model was not robust enough. Because one of the challenges with, let's say, sending a plumber to the house or a cleaner to the house is this. The moment you come to my house, I get to know the plumber. I'll say, okay, next time I'll pay you privately. Why do I need to pay this extra fee? To Carlton. So, that was a very important insight, which needed to be addressed as a business model. If you want to make this successful, right? You got to create a business model where, the thousands of people, who are able to help and solve different problems at home, whatever they are, guards, plumbers, cleaners, and so on and so forth. One is they must have a level of stickiness and loyalty to the platform. Second, they must have a certain level of even affinity and even income security, right? Then at a third level, there's got to be something in it even for the customer. The customer must feel there is more value if I directly liaison, coordinate with the platform rather than individually with the plumber or the, let's say, maid or the cleaner. So this was a not so visible part of their, let's say, business model, which they did not kind of fix or address. And then, of course, you add to it pandemic, which happened. So they ended up closing shop around 2022, 2023. Quite frankly, I was quite, sad to see them close down because I thought this was a novel idea which was potentially global in its, let's say, scale and reach. It could have easily become a platform for Asia, for the ASEAN region. They could have easily, not easily, they could have definitely scaled it if they'd gotten some of these softer factors worked out there.
So I think in terms of business models, we see very similar ones all across the globe, right? Whether it's Uber or Didi or Grab. And I think we've all seen the lessons why some succeed and some fail. And even like Uber failed in China, in spite of capital, no lack of capital, no lack of operational knowledge. But clearly they got something wrong. And I think this is where, we go back to those 5 pillars and usually one of those components was compromised.
Definitely. To sign off on this particular subject on the different kinds of companies that did not get their scaling right. A popular one is fashion, valet or valet, whatever you call it, depending on which country you come from. They suddenly had a huge burst of capital. At one point, they were valued at close to $100 million. They were working with a whole raft of local designers. And where I think they completely blew it was in the lack of operational discipline. Whether it's cost control, whether it is cash management, like you spoke about, and its overall accountability. In terms of holding the leaders accountable, holding, directors accountable and so on. It was a lot of capital that ultimately, literally got destroyed. But too much of this celebrity struck, people were drawn and invested in it. But then they did not look deep enough to see how they were running it as a business. Frankly, I thought it was a good idea, but overall badly managed and,
So we go back to that 20% strategy, 80% execution. The ideas were great. So, whether it is Uber in China or, a lot of times it's the same strategy, but the execution may just differ geographically. And that's where it fails, right? Or it just falls apart.
We've had a long session, Boon. I just want to round this off with one last question. We've touched on various aspects and even nuance. To all the people watching this, mostly entrepreneurs, and many of them are going to be, small, medium-sized entrepreneurs. What's going to be your main advice? What are a few things you'd like them to think about?
So we touched on that. If I was a new business today, I would start with, can my business be a force of doing good? Because I think when you have a very clear purpose, you have a very strong, it actually becomes part of your strategy. So I would start there as one point. And to me, even if it's an existing business, it also needs to be reviewed because I think it's a way of future-proofing your current business. And I mean, as you know, this subject, while it's a whole subject in itself, this is what prompted me and a few like-minded colleagues to set up Better Business School, where we can actually propagate and educate entrepreneurs about how businesses can be a force for doing good. And if they can't find a higher purpose, at least to make their existing companies have a profit sharing scheme. At least you're doing good at home. And they say charity starts at home. So how do you build business owner-like rewards for your team? And I think my personal experience is that you actually end up in a better place with a better teamwork. And when people know what's clearly in it for them, they certainly are a lot more motivated.
I think that's very clear. Let me give, let's say, my 4 perspectives on any entrepreneur that is looking at scaling must keep in mind. First thing is get your team right. Go for impact players. Second, ask yourself whether you have a scalable business models, because most business models are not scalable. Number 3, don't scale for the sake of scaling. Have a meaningful purpose. Ideally, look at being a force for good, something honorable you're trying to accomplish. Finally, keep a close, hard look at cash, because everything will fall apart when you do not keep a hard look at your cash. That would be my 2 bits here.
The other thing I would add, and it's building on what you're talking about, is really to look at the total addressable market of your business. We said to be an entrepreneur is kind of a crazy thing to do. So it's the same amount of effort to build a business in one where there is a small total addressable market versus one that there's a big one.
Very important.
And if that isn't a big one, why bother?
Exactly. Once again, very important. Really what you're saying is you cannot scale if you're pursuing a market that is niche or small. So one of the preconditions of scaling is go for a big market. That's really what you're saying. Yeah, right? Wonderful. I really have to ask one more question here. And because it's being edited, it's fine. What are the businesses that you think are easily scalable, and what are the businesses that you think are difficult to scale, in your opinion?
I think businesses that involve human relationships are far harder to scale. I mean, one of the biggest enablers of scaling today is the social media platform, right? You've seen great ideas being able to scale just because the market reach today has been democratized. Anyone can reach a customer 10,000 miles away. So I think definitely if you build a business model where you are accessing the social media or the internet to get customers, it's your total addressable market is naturally much bigger than something that requires one-to-one relationships.
So if I summarize what you said, any business that is very intensely personalized and human relationship driven is going to be slightly more difficult to scale. And any business that, is digitally, let's say, driven becomes easier to scale because of the total addressable market is literally democratized. So it becomes easier for you to scale. I'll probably give my 2 bits, slightly differently. just based on my experience. To me, here are a few businesses that are difficult to scale. I'll actually spell them out. If you are a brick and mortar retail business, it's very difficult to scale. And not that it cannot be scaled, but it's very difficult to scale. It's expensive to scale, and you don't know whether you can pull it off. To me, if you're a standalone restaurant, it's very difficult to scale because a restaurant almost always is held hostage by the chef. And you are petrified every day whether your chef is going to stick around. And it's very difficult to find, a different chef for a whole ton of different branches you're going to open up. So having a great standalone restaurant, is a very difficult proposition to scale. And not that it cannot be done, it can be done. But it's complex. To me, a third business that is difficult to scale is a professional services firm. Let's say,
which is where the face-to-face
very much
thing comes in, right?
Very much. Like a large part of what I do is, fundamentally unscalable because they want me in every meeting. So, if you're a strategy consulting company, very difficult to scale. You can't just ask AI to do it. You can ask AI to do the analysis, but ultimately you got to sit there and deploy the solutions and have the conversation and share the insights. So a professional consulting firm is a very difficult proposition to scale. To me, a custom manufacturing firm, and there are many, they're also very hard to scale because everything is individualized and customized. You can't do it at a mass kind of scaling.
So this is where, interestingly, we see a lot of 3D printing shops, farms now they're calling it.
Correct.
And that is almost customization at scale. So, it's happening.
I suppose, there are these new opportunities which may very well open the floodgates, even in markets which were very difficult to scale earlier.
So, when we talk about custom, we think about is one-off, and then it requires a lot of work. So in the 3D printing farms, it's about harnessing, again, this is technology driven because you can have a customer anywhere around the world and you can just send the final product because you have obviously very sophisticated 3D printers that you will not buy for one product that you want to make yourself, but if it's available as a service. And so that's happening, for example.
So what are the businesses that easily scale? I'm just qualifying what you said, but I'm just breaking it down. And to me, a software as a service is a dramatically scalable business, SaaS, so if you're in that business, you really have what it takes to scale, but then your software needs to be fantastic and far superior to what exists in the market. To me, e-commerce platforms are a scalable business because these platforms are important, for other players to sell their products, and you are charging rent for this. Extremely scalable. Then digital products are easy to scale because your market is global, and like you said, you can democratize your reach. Then digital marketing companies, are easily scalable. If you come out with either a product or a service or a solution which is based on a mobile app, that's also going to be easy to scale. If you're in the data analytics business, that is, fairly easy to scale. So these are some businesses which are easy to scale, but then you qualified it earlier, either social media or digital. I just thought I'll just break it down and then let's say headline them.
So let's call it high potential to scale.
Correct.
Easy is still a relative term.
Agree with you. I agree with you.
I mean, your total addressable market is just that much bigger.
I agree with you. Well, one of the challenges we as a company have faced, we're a platform for entrepreneurs. So consulting is something we do, impossible to scale. So we said, let's use consulting to build case studies and showcase outstanding examples. But you can't scale that. So, we've reconciled to the fact that don't bother scaling this. There's a lot of training that we do, which is also intensive, with 2 days, 3 days, labor intensive, So we said what we could do is to productize that, to digitize that. So we've started to do that. Not that it is easy, but it becomes possible when you productize, maybe training. Maybe, you can, whether it's branding or how to build a startup or how to do certain things, all these are productizable that can help you scale. The other way that we are, trying to scale is by partnering up with very strong players who have their independent networks and customers, so that we don't go around, either trying to market or create new networks or new customers, but work with other solid partners who come with big networks and customers. So that's another way we are looking at scaling. So that's my 2 bit on some of the businesses that have high potential to scale and businesses that are quite difficult to scale. So you know what, we've done a whole walkthrough on pretty much most of the important aspects about scaling. What is scaling? What businesses can scale easily? What does it take to scale a business? Where do many businesses miss the bus on scaling? What they get wrong? And what are, let's say, noteworthy examples of well-known brands and businesses that completely imploded and completely got it wrong? And then some key insights about, what are some of the things anybody needs to remember if you want to get on this journey. So that's a big subject, I suppose, handled in about an hour and a half. I just want to tell everybody watching this that Boon Yong is a global expert on scaling. And he has, some unique, let's say, skill sets and competencies. One is he scaled his own businesses. He's been in the diamond business. He, works as a senior advisor and stakeholder with the KN group of, the furniture group. He's also excelled in investment banking, so he understands cash, he understands capital. He's got global experience working across London, Europe, in Shanghai, Southeast Asia. He was in Rothschilds, and then he has held a very senior leadership position with AO and so on and so forth. He's the right person to dish out practical advice and insights on scaling. So it's been a delight talking to you, Boon. I have no doubts the people watching it are going to walk away with a truck full of nuggets and insights. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for that embellished introduction, but really just my own sharing of experiences. And if I can just close with this, and that would be that even if you don't scale to unicorn size, the fact that if you get on the journey of scaling, it will nonetheless improve your business to at least greater freedom for yourself.
Thank you. That's a great way to round off this discussion. You don't necessarily need to be a 600-pound gorilla. It's good enough to be a 100-pound gorilla. Because that gives you wealth, it gives you freedom, and then it gets you the ability to create impact. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Karthik, for having me. Much appreciated.